120 AD, a Roman commander gave an order that would become one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. He told 5,000 men to march north. Not a single one came back. The 9th Legion, Legio IX Hispana, was not some forgotten garrison force. These were out-and-out killers, veterans of the Spanish campaigns, survivors of the famous Boudica rebellion, men who'd watched Britain burn and then helped Rome rebuild it from the ashes. 5,000 soldiers, cavalry, engineers, medics, a walking city of war, hardened by decades of blood. They marched beyond the last Roman outpost, past the edge of the known world, into a land Rome had never conquered, a land the Romans simply called Caledonia, Scotland. And then, silence. No dispatches arrived, no retreat orders were sent, no battlefield was ever found, no bones, no armor, no mass grave. 5,000 men don't just vanish, but these ones did. And for nearly 2,000 years, no one has been able to explain why. But to understand how Rome lost an entire legion without losing a single battle, we need to go back to the empire that believed it was invincible. 120 AD, Rome controlled everything that mattered. 60 million people across 3 continents, connected by roads so well built you can still drive on some of them. The legions were the most disciplined fighting force the ancient world had ever produced. Every soldier carried 60 pounds of equipment. Every unit moved as one organism. They didn't just win battles, they ended civilizations. And Britannia was supposed to be the final proof. The wild island at the edge of the world, conquered and garrisoned, its tribes broken, its druids scattered, its rebellion crushed under Boudica's burning corpse. Rome had poured thousands of men and millions of sesterces into making Britain Roman. But there was a problem, and every soldier stationed north of Londinium knew it. Beyond the forts, beyond the roads, beyond the last ditch Rome had dug, the land changed. The hills got steeper, the forests got thicker, the fog rolled in and didn't leave, and the people who lived there, the Caledonians, the Picts, had never knelt. Not once. Not for anyone. Rome had tried before. Governor Agricola had pushed north in 83 AD and fought the Caledonians at Mons Graupius. Rome claimed victory. But here's what the records don't say loudly enough. They pulled back south almost immediately. They won the battle and abandoned the land. Now why would the victors do that? That should tell you everything about what waited north of the wall. The 9th Legion knew where they were going. They knew the terrain was hostile, the enemy invisible, the supply lines long and fragile. They marched anyway, because that's what legions did. They crossed the line. Not Hadrian's Wall, because that wouldn't be built for another few years. But there was a line. Every Roman in Britain knew it. The point where the road stopped, the forts ended, and the maps went blank. North of that line, you were in someone else's country. And the Caledonians knew you were coming long before you arrived. The 9th marched into Caledonia sometime around 120 AD. The exact date is unknown, and that is the first crack in the story. Rome documented everything. Troop movements, supply requests, officer rotations, pay records. The bureaucracy of empire was relentless. And yet for the 9th Legion's final march, there is almost nothing. No orders have survived. No campaign diary. No report sent back to the governor. 5,000 men walked into the fog, and the paperwork stopped with them. Now, the leading theory for centuries was a Pictish ambush. A confederation of northern tribes, fighting on their own ground, in their own weather, using hit-and-run tactics that Roman formations couldn't counter. Imagine 5,000 men in tight column formation moving through a highland pass, and arrows coming from everywhere and nowhere. The fog doesn't lift. The enemy doesn't stand and fight. They just bleed you, mile after mile after mile. It's a compelling theory. But there's a problem with it, and it's a big one. Destroying a full Roman legion in open or guerrilla combat would have been the greatest military achievement in Caledonian history. It would have echoed through tribal memory for generations. The Picts decorated standing stones with their victories. They celebrated the killing of Romans. And yet, there is no Pictish record of destroying the 9th. No stone, no carving, no oral tradition, nothing. If the Picts wiped out 5,000 Roman soldiers, why did they never mention it? Historians looked elsewhere, and what they found only made the mystery worse. In 1959, a tile stamp from the 9th Legion was found at Nijmegen in the Netherlands, dated to after 120 AD. Officers' names from the 9th appeared on records in Cappadocia, which is in modern-day Turkey, decades later. Some scholars now argue the Legion wasn't destroyed at all, that it was simply transferred east, broken up, and its men scattered across other units across the empire. But this theory has its own silence at its center. If Rome transferred the 9th, why is there no transfer order? Rome reassigned legions constantly, it was routine paperwork. The 2nd Legion moved to Caerleon, the 20th to Chester, and we have records for 8 of them. The 9th? Nothing. And there's something else, something that haunts every theory. After the 9th vanished, Rome did something it almost never did. It pulled back. Emperor Hadrian visited Britain personally in 122 AD, just 2 years later, and ordered the construction of a 73-mile wall across the entire width of the island. Not to keep the Scots out, to mark the line beyond which Rome would never go again. Think about that. The greatest empire on earth built a wall to mark its own limit. Rome didn't build walls to contain enemies. It built walls when something had shaken its confidence so badly that conquest was no longer worth the cost. Something happened north of that line that changed Rome's calculus forever. And whatever it was, they never wrote it down. A veteran centurion's tombstone was found at Lincoln. He had served with the Ninth. His stone records his service, his rank, his years. But there is no mention of how the legion ended. No destroyed in battle. No disbanded with honors. The name of a legion that stopped existing, carved by a man who survived it and never explained why. Here is what we know. 5,000 Roman soldiers marched north into Caledonia, and after 120 AD, the 9th Legion vanishes from every Roman record in existence. The evidence pulls in two directions. Tile stamps and officer names place men from the 9th in the Netherlands and Turkey decades later, suggesting a transfer. But there is no transfer order, no reassignment paperwork, nothing. And if the legion simply moved east, why did Emperor Hadrian arrive in Britain 2 years later and make sure to build a 73-mile wall across the entire island? You don't build a wall because you reassign the legion. You build a wall because you lost one, brutally. Most historians now believe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. The 9th likely suffered a catastrophic defeat in Caledonia, not a clean annihilation, but a devastating mauling that shattered the legion beyond recovery. The survivors, too few to rebuild the unit, were quietly absorbed into other legions across the empire. Rome didn't record the disaster, because Rome didn't record its failures. The legion wasn't transferred, it was erased, and Hadrian's Wall wasn't the border. It was a scar from their defeat. The 9th Legion has been missing for 1900 years. We will probably never find their bones in the Scottish peat, but we don't need to, because Rome's silence tells us everything. An empire that documented menial things like grain shipments and gladiator injuries chose to say absolutely nothing about the fate of 5,000 men. 5,000 of their own men. That silence tells us exactly what happened to the Legion of 5,000.